वे तपस्या does reap benefits?
सर इसको IAS आपने बनाया, फोरम ने बनाया एक्चुअली। तो फोरम ने इसका पोटेंशियल जो देखा है और इसको जो तराशा है सर, उसके लिए सर फोरम को सैल्यूट है, दिल से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद है।
तपस्या कैंपस है स्पेसिफिकली जहाँ पे हम खड़े हुए हैं। दिस शुड बी अ वे फॉरवर्ड फॉर एनी एस्पिरेंट।
Hello everyone, welcome to the Forum IAS Townhall, the daily newspaper analysis of The Hindu. Today, on November 19, we are going to take up these 5 topics for the discussion. The first topic is about time to sort out the India's cereal mess. This topic basically talking about the paradox which India is facing. At one point, on one hand, we have massive surplus stocks of rice, wheats, whereas on other hand, we are importing pulses and edible oils, despite being the global producer of the pulses and major oil seeds. So this article tries to understand the reason behind this and what could be our policy recommendation to correct this paradox. The second news article is about the unpacking the global happiness ranking. So this news article deals with the issue which India is facing, that despite being the 4th largest economy, India's ranking at the global happiness index has been very low. But whereas we are seeing our neighbor country like Pakistan, it is performing better than India on this happiness ranking. So this article tries to understand the ranking, the methodologies which has been followed for this global happiness ranking. And then it tries to understand it and suggest some measures where we can improve. The third article will be about the excessive dependence. So this editorial talks about the India's trade deficit, especially in the goods sector. So recently in October 2025, India has recorded the high good trade deficit, and the reasons are few reasons, like US has recently imposed the 50% tariffs, and there are many other reasons also. So this editorial tries to understand those various reasons behind this trade deficits, whether it is a structural shift or it's a temporary dip. The next news article is about the bad tidings. So this is about recently in Sonbad district of Uttar Pradesh, there was a stone quarry collapse which claimed several lives and raised a serious concern about the safety standards in our India's mining industries. So it talks about that what are the various concerns and what could be our course of action for this. The fifth article is about the NH National Highway 701A highway is an ecological risk. So this news article talks about it has raised the major concern about the development versus environment debate. So at one hand, we are developing the road highway projects which increase the connectivity, not only just people to people, but as well as improve the economic growth of that region also. But at the same time, it is coming at the cost of environment as well as social impact. So this news article talks about and understand how we can maintain the balance between these things, and so that our development is more about sustainable. So let's start with our news discussion. So the first news about the time to sort out India's cereal mess. So basically, India, you might be seeing that India is considered as the largest producers of many food, one of the largest producer of the food grains. But on other hand, India is also importing the pulses, edible oils, despite being the global largest producer. So what are the reasons behind this, which we have to understand? So the recent development is we talked about. So the procurement of the paddy rice across India hit 119.86 lakh tons by October 31, 2025. It's far exceeding the last year's 82.08 lakh tons. And if we talks about the rice stocks, it is more than double required norms. So we have the stocks of rice more than it is required. For example, we have around 356.1 lakh tons versus 102.5 lakh tons, which is required. Similarly, in the case of the wheat procurement also, we have more balanced with the PDS offtake sometimes exceeding the procurement. But the issue is, despite surplus rice, wheat, India spends around 2 lakh crore annually on the food subsidies and import 1.2 lakh crore worth of edible oil and 30,000 crore worth of pulses annually. So it is trying to show a paradox, a contradiction in our agriculture sector, that on one hand we are producing as well as we have enough stocks, but as well as we are spending too much on the imports of other edible oils and the pulses. So what are the key concerns? The first thing is about the crop diversification. We know that we have an MSP policy for the procurement from the farmers, and the farmers prefer paddies or wheat usually because of the MSP assurance. This leads to the overproduction of and underproduction of pulses and oilseed. And as we have that, MSP is one of the reasons for discouragement of the crop rotation, which ultimately affect the soil health and sustainability. So here we can say that is MSP is one of the reasons causing this concern. Another one is about the market distortion. We know that the cheap edible oil we have been importing since 1990s, which has suppressed the domestic oil seed production. So obviously, if we have a better option to import and we are getting at a cheaper cost, so preference will be given to the cheaper one. And because of that, it is compromising our domestic oil seed production. And despite we have stable cultivated area, it's not something like we don't have area. We cannot grow the pulses at our home. We can do that, but we are mainly dependent on the export. Procurement system has also faultiness. The current system dominated by FCI state agencies and is plagued by the inefficiency, delays and corruption. The Tamil Nadu's procurement bottlenecks are emblematic of the broader national challenges. So we can say that in the article, the author has taken an example of Tamil Nadu, which we can is easily reflected at the national level also. The same issues like inefficiency, delays and corruptions by FCI and state agencies in the procurement system, we can observe at national level also. Another one is the leakages and the losses. The study estimates that around 28% loss in PDS distribution, and farmers often face payment delays and forced bribes for the procurement. So these are the concerns. Because of this, we are seeing the distorted situation of our agriculture production and the distribution. So what are the policy recommendations? First of all, we have to incentivize a crop diversification. And how we can do that? We can do that through the MSP expansion, market studies of demand and supplies, what is required, and then educating the farmers. Meanwhile, creating the awareness among the farmers for the crop diversification and the benefit of that. We can promote the farmer producer organization also. So farmer producer organization have a better capacity, so they can be reduce the dependence on the government for the procurement. So for example, the farmer producer organization can create their own warehouses, so they can store or they can procure on the behalf of the government, or they can create an alternative to the government procurement also. We have to allow the free rice exports to reduce the surplus and encourage a market-driven production. So if we are allowing the exports freely, so obviously our production will be market linked. So based on the demand and supply in the market, we will be producing the rice. So it will help us to deal with the surplus also. Another one is reform the procurement, storage and distribution system with a better transparency and accountability. Let's move to the next news article, that is about unpacking the global happiness ranking. So recently the World Happiness reports, what are the key findings? So as usual, Finland has topped the World Happiness report for the 8th consecutive years, and it has been followed by the Nordic countries like Denmark, Iceland and Sweden. India, though it has improved its rank from 126 to the 118 this year, but Pakistan is way ahead. It is at 109 in the global ranking, despite being economically and facing the economic and political challenges. So this raises a question on the authenticity of this ranking. If we talk about how they are conducting this survey, so it is basically based on the survey where individuals rate their lives on the scale of 0 to 10 by considering the 6 variables. So these are GDP per capita, social support, life expectancy, freedom, generosity, and the corruption perceptions. If we find out the reason why the Nordic countries are topping the list, because we can question based on the why the Pakistan is above us, but by and large we accept that Nordic countries, they are topping, they might have topped it. So what are the reason behind it? So the article find out that the Nordic nations score high due to the strong social trust, robust welfare system, access to the nature, and high quality of life. Here it has talked about that institutional trust is crucial. The Finns believe in community kindness and have faith in their system, which boosts the happiness even if the material wealth isn't highest. So this is what it's talking about. Money is not just a parameter to decide the happiness. There are other things also like community kindness, faith in their system. Because of that, they are ranking better and in the world happiness ranking. Apart from this, the social support, freedom, and work-life balance is also major contributor why the Nordic countries are topping this list. Let's see the India's paradox, that is growth versus happiness. So India's low ranking is not due to the poverty alone. So it's not just because of poverty India is ranking below. It's because of the rising aspiration, media scrutiny, and high expectation in the vibrant democracy lead to the lower satisfaction even as well-being improve. What does this mean? This line means that though we are growing, our standard of living is improving, but at the same time, our aspiration is also rising. There is a high media scrutiny, high expectations in our vibrant democracy, which is leading to the lower satisfaction. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say in 1970s, 1980s, if you see that era, if anyone has even the scooter, that is considered as a highly satisfied, high status in our society. But today, as we have seen that, the scooters or high-end bikes and all those things. So if somebody right now will be given scooter, don't you think that he is going to be dissatisfied more? Because he has higher expectation, because he has already seen that there are high-end motorcycles or highly advanced vehicles better than scooter. So when you have the higher expectation and when it doesn't get meet, you are bound to feel dissatisfied. And this is going to be reflected in your happiness ranking. And the same thing is happening in the case of Pakistan. Why Pakistan is performing better than us? Because in the Pakistan, they don't have that much of expectation. So if they are getting the motorcycle, 100cc motorcycle, they are satisfied. So that is why they are happy. So this is what does mean that India has a rising aspiration, media scrutiny, and high expectation. And because of that, there is a lower satisfaction. Another reason, the social trust and community bonds are weaker in urban areas, whereas it is stronger in rural areas, in village networks. But this parameter does not consider the villages. It usually captures the global metrics of urban areas. So that is why also these things are not being reflected in their ranking. Another one is India's happiness rank fluctuated from 94 to 114 in the last decade, reflecting the changes in the governance, welfare schemes, and public sentiment, not just economic performance. So it is showing that we have improved our GDP level in the last decade, but it has been fluctuating. So it means that there are various other factors because of that we are not able to perform good on these parameters. But what are the criticism and limitation of this this survey? The reports relies on a subjective perception, which can be influenced by cultural norms and expectation. As we have discussed, if you have higher expectations, so obviously you will be higher chance of being dissatisfied. Another one is that indexes is like these often have a weird bias. Weird means Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic, which overlook the collective trust and informal support system which is prevalent in countries like India. Democracy may score lower due to the greater openness and self-criticism, while authoritarian regimes may appear stable because the dissent is suppressed. So as we said, in the democracies, you have more open system, you can criticize the government also, and based on that, you might have that lower satisfaction level. But that is not the case in authoritarian regimes. Though we have find the faults in the reports methodology, but still there are something which India can learn and can improve our policy. So India need to invest in empathy infrastructure. What is this? This is rebuilding the social capital, restoring the institutional trust, prioritizing the mental health as a part of economic policy. So the article says that the social capital how you can create the social capital by creating the community space, shared meals and intergenerational ties. The reports find that household size and belief in community kindness significantly raise the happiness. The second one is to restore the institutional trust. How we can do that? By simplifying the citizen-state interaction. When public services work transparently, the trust follows, even the ration card, railway tickets. So it's increase the trust in our institutions. And then recognizing the mental health as an economic policy, the productivity gains mirror psychological well-being. Even the World Health Organization estimate that every $1 spent on mental health yields $4 in returns. So let's move to our next article, that is about the excessive dependence. So it's talked about that India's external trade. Is it the structural shift or the temporary shock? So India's good trades deficit hit the record high of $41.68 billion in October 2025 in comparison to September, where it was $32.15 billion. So what exactly it is significant is because we have to understand that what are the factors behind this. So there are various combination of factors. Because of this, we are seeing this shift. First one is the US tariff impact. So as we know that Donald Trump has imposed the 50% tariffs on certain Indian goods in August 2025. So it has impacted the India's export very hard, especially because the US is considered as India's single largest export market. So that is the major reason where your single market imposing the tariffs. So it is going to hit your exports. Another one is about there has been a surge in the import of precious metals. Like gold imports nearly tripled, silver imports rose 5-fold. But why so? It's not because of the demand has increased for the gold and silver in domestic level. It is basically because as a hedging behavior. Because the central banks, they are preferring to hedge their economy against gold in comparison to the dollar, which was a previous practice. Because of economic uncertainty and weakening rupees, they are preferring to hedge through gold imports and silvers. There is an export decline also. The goods exports fell by 11.8% year on year. Because if we are talking about the trade deficits, so it means that at one hand, our export is reducing as well as the import is also increasing. So that is also lead to the trade deficit. So the thing is, the export has been declined in labor intensive sectors like textile, apparel and engineering goods, which is a major concern. And export to the US is also declined by 9%. Import has surged. It is partly due to the depreciating rupees, but also reflect the increased use of cheaper import intermediate goods to keep the finished export competitive rather than domestic sourcing. What does this mean? To export the finished goods, we need some intermediate goods, but intermediate goods, instead of sourcing from the domestic side, we are importing this intermediate goods because we are getting at a cheaper rate. So here our import has increased. So that is also being reflected in the trade deficit. If we talked about the geopolitical adjustment, the Russia's import has been fell by 27.73, while US import rose by 13.89%, which suggests efforts to reduce the reliance on Russian crude and address the US trade deficit concern. What should be our policy response? So the government has launched the export promotion initiatives worth of 25,000 crores over 6 years. And even the RBI has announced the relief measures for the exports affected by the traffic headwinds. If we see this trend of the goods trade deficit, if the India-US bilateral trade agreements is concluded swiftly and the tariffs are rolled back, then we will consider it as a temporary flip. But if the deficit persists, it indicates there is a structural shift in India's trade portfolios. So we have to reduce our over dependence on US market and explore other markets also. Let's move to the next news article, that is about the bad tidings. So recently in Sonbhat district, there is a stone quarry collapse which claimed several lives and raised a serious concern about the safety standards in India's mining industry. So this article has pointed out certain key points. So regarding the safety and regulation, the incident highlights the lack of micro-level geological studies and safety protocol at contractor level. So basically what happened that usually when before leasing any mining blocks, there is a broad geological surveys done by the state government or government. Then they leased out those mining blocks. Now it is a responsibility of the individual contractor to do the micro level geological studies and safety protocol. But this has been ignored by the contractors, which increase the risk of accidents. Another one is the illegal quarrying and the oversight. It has been, you might have seen in many Bollywood movies also, there's a rampant illegal quarryings, especially in small scale stone quarries, which are often least safety conscious. Contractors frequently rely on the rule of thumb decision for blasting and slope cutting rather than scientific assessment. Another thing about this is that most of the people at the level of small scale stone quarrying belongs to economically weaker section. So from them, we cannot expect such much of as a safety consciousness. So that is also a reason for the high risk of accident. The safety measures, proper benching like creating the horizontal plateaus on the slopes, accurate blasting design are essential for preventing the collapse. However, these measures are often ignored and workers frequently lack adequate safety gears and training. We have the technologies and expertise also. Like India's premier mining institute, IIT Dhanbad has expertise and technology to improve the safety and efficiency in mining. But the challenge lies in the political will to implement this solution at the ground level. So that is an issue, we are seeing it. If we see certain additional information related to this, the legal and policy framework, we have Mines Act 1952 and Minerals Conservation and Development Rules 2017, which mandates there should be a safety protocols and environmental safeguards. However, we know that the enforcement is really weak, especially in the small scale operation. If we see about the human cost and development, so the mining region like Sonbhat often suffers from the poor health, education, infrastructure, despite they have a high resource wealth, which highlights that there is a disconnect between the mineral extraction and the human development. So despite those areas are rich in resources, but they are poor in health, education, and infrastructure. Let's move to the last news article, that is NH701 highway is an ecological risk. So recently the Ministry of Road and Transport and Highways is advancing the construction of NH701 highways in Kashmir Valley, which will connect the Sofian to Mogam. But it has raised certain environmental and social concern. Like the highway transfers the ecologically sensitive mountains terrain, like including forest, grazing land, and water catchment. It also raises a concern about the slope stability, landslide, and biodiversity loss also. Because in the mountains region, if we have to construct the highways, we have to cut the slopes. And this is where we need a proper geological studies. But in 2023, the geological studies highlighted high risk of slope failures along the cut slopes in similar terrains, especially during heavy rainfall. So that could lead to the landslides also and create a disaster in future. The projects bypass the existing connectivity, and its construction may disrupt the livelihood of the pastoralist communities like Gujjar and Bakrwals, who depend on grazing grounds on the 𝐼𝐸 and Dudhpatri. Another the environmental concern is regarding the hydrological system of the glacier, because in the mountains we know that the rivers and all those things are glacier-fed regions, and they are very fragile. If we are going to construct the road there, it will trigger the erosion and sedimentation in the rivers, and which will degrade the water quality and also exacerbate the risk in the climate vulnerable zone also. As we already seeing, due to the climate change, the glaciers are melting, and if this with these unsustainable projects also, it is going to escalate those melting of glacier. But we have certain safeguards also, like we have environmental impact assessments. So it talks about that wherever there is a large scale road projects, they have require environmental impact assessment under EIA notification 2006, which include public consultation and ecological studies. So it has been made mandatory for the public consultation. But there are certain exemptions also, like if the project is within the 100 kilometers of line of control, then it is exempted from the prior environmental clearances, because here we are giving priority to the security reasons because of the safety concern. But it doesn't mean that we are totally ignoring every studies. Here we have to take care of the other safeguard also, like slope stability, disaster management, hydrological studies are still important, which we have to conclude it. But it has been seen that the government is not showing positive interest in this direction. So these are the topics from today. Thank you, everyone.